my friends. Thanks for joining me today. J.R. Dukes at your service. Appreciate everybody piling on in and stopping by and having today's chat. Just hit the go button, so we want to make sure everything is coming in clear. If you have any trouble hearing me, please let me know in the comments. I want to say quickly hello to all of our viewers on the X platform. Hello to my friends on YouTube and, of course, our friends on Twitch at the same time. If you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself, say hello, let us know where you are from. And I just put in the link if you would like to join us live, because this is it's open to you if you'd like to ask a question. If you'd like to call in and ask a question, no problem. Just click that link. You don't even have to appear on video. You can ask whatever question or comment you wish to share with us. Additionally, you have the option of actually joining us via video. So let me put the full link in there. Sometimes YouTube will cut it off, so I just want to make sure everybody's got the full link. There we go. Okay, should pop on in just a second. All right, let me just check our chat and see who's in here already. All right, everybody's getting ready for Thanksgiving. I'm assuming probably a lot of us are going to start traveling, if not today, very, very soon. So hello to American Nana, as always, from West Virginia, Appalachia. Beautiful after this time of year. I'd love to drive up into that area of our country. Beautiful. I used to love to go to the Smoky Mountains between, was that Cherokee and Gatlinburg there in Tennessee. Love that area out there. So, and I hope everybody is doing well, recovering from the storm. I know they got hammered in that particular area from Helena. So Hurricane Helena, that was definitely tough. So let's go ahead and hit today's news. Fantastic news today. Fantastic news. We had President Trump received great news from the evil, whatever you want to call him. He's just a terrible, terrible individual. We're talking about the so-called special prosecutor Jack Smith that was appointed by President Biden to go after Donald Trump, basically to engage in what only can be described as lawfare. This is lawfare. I mean, this guy is the embodiment of lawfare. Everything that a democracy should not do, this is exactly what this man engaged in. Remember, we've talked about in this program, this guy is effectively a failed prosecutor that was, I think he was either West Virginia or state of Virginia. He went after the governor there and his wife. He actually did get an initial conviction, and then the Supreme Court reversed him on all counts and gave him a very stern reprimand that he essentially violated the law, misinterpreted the law, did all kinds of nasty malfeasance, if you will. Then, in embarrassment, he left, went overseas, went to The Hague, started prosecuting people over there for war crimes, whatever. Whatever. He just had to leave the country because of the embarrassment. At least that's my opinion. Then he shows back up and he picks up this work at destroying our nation. That's about the only way I can say it. This is a man that he participated in taking our great nation and turning it into what can only be described as what we've heard in school, Banana Republic. That's exactly what it is. That if you don't agree with the people that are in power or the people that may come up to power, you take them out. If you can't kill them, you take their money. If you can't take all their money, or if you do take all their money, well, at the same time, go ahead and imprison them. Remember, they did not start this fiasco until President Donald Trump-elect decided that, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run for the Republican nomination. And, of course, his goal that he obviously met. We're so happy he met this. He's going to be the president of the United States again. And after he decided he was going to seek that nomination to become president again, they decided to open a can of you-know-what against him on all levels. Remember, you had President Biden. He had his own, I think it was the number 3 in command at the DOJ, the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., quit that cushy, nice job and went to work for Letitia James and that Alvin Bragg in New York City. You know how the state of New York, the home of lawfare, they put that guy in there for a job that was less pay, had to start all over in his career, so to speak, because he was the new guy there, so to speak. But our suspicion is very clear that this was part of the orchestration all along to make sure that President Biden had a person in that state attorney general's office, the actual New York City's office of their prosecution there, the Alvin Bragg team, was able to make sure he's there to make sure everything is orchestrated. In addition to that, they had a Washington guy from Biden's administration. That one guy we said was the plant. We talked about him many times on this program here, that actually went to work for Fannie Willis's office, the sweet, cash-loving Fannie Willis and her lover with no experience, Nathan Wade, that headed this so-called RICO prosecution / persecution of President Donald Trump and other individuals that were working for President Donald Trump. It was just a complete setup to take down Donald Trump. I think Alan Dershowitz said it best in a book that he came out with years ago, and it's properly titled Get Trump. That's all it was, ladies and gentlemen, just an effort to get President Donald Trump elect, to take him out before he can take office. And thank God Almighty that they failed. They failed, ladies and gentlemen, on each and every end possible. And I am so happy that this has come to fruition, so to speak. And listen, we're going to look at these videos here. We're going to actually look at the documents. I have the actual document that Jack Smith filed today. It's dated today. It's timestamped today. He did not do this because he's a good guy. He did not do this because he sees the errors of his way. I hear a lot of people on the news and the so-called talking heads, and they're saying things like, hey, he's doing this for the good of the country. He's doing this because he loves the Department of Justice, and their policies state that you cannot go after a sitting president or effectively a President Donald Trump elect. But remember, this is the same Jack Smith that did not care about the Department of Justice policies before. All of a sudden, he's had, I guess, an epiphany that I need to start following the law. I need to start following the rules, because as Jack Smith, I love America and I love the Department of Justice, and I got to do what is right in the interest of the American people. That is that is a crock. We all know exactly what is. The only reason that he decided that he was going to go ahead and bring all this to an end is because he had no choice. As I was stating a minute ago, I think it was 60 days. The Department of Justice has an internal policy that they will not prosecute, work on a case, whatever you want to call it, involving an active candidate for the president of the United States, any candidate per se, but especially a president of the United States, within 60 days. But that didn't stop Jack Smith, did it? No, it did not. He went after him with everything he had in his arsenal. And the only reason, in my opinion, that he has done an about face is he has no choice. He knows if he allows this to continue, he does not resign pretty quickly. Because, see, by law, at least by Department of Policy, he has to fill out a final report, if you will, and make sure everything's dotted and the T's crossed, this type of stuff. And it takes time to do that. You can't simply just say, I quit and walk away. You have to go through basically a winding down process, kind of like Mr. Hur did in the Hur report pertaining to President Joe Biden. So it's kind of the same thing with Jack Smith. He's got to get moving one way or the other. Either Donald Trump's going to fire him the moment he takes the oath of office, or he needs to start winding it down. And that's exactly what he did. And again, we're going to take a look at those documents here in just 1 second. Let me check our comments real quick. American Anna: I'm in the middle of changing my kitchen faucet. Oh, we are obviously always glad to have you here, American Anna. What do you think of Kash Patel? I think that'd be a great choice. You're thinking no? Tell me why you're thinking that. I'm interested. I will tell you, I have not done a deep dive on him yet, but I think he would be a fantastic pick. Has he been picked as the FBI? I still think he's debating that, right? Let me know. And go ahead and tell me why. Why do you think that is? Also, for y'all that are listening, if you do so, hit the thumbs up button. I'd appreciate it. Helps the channel, helps the algorithm. If you're on the X platform, hit the heart. Make sure you subscribe. That way y'all know when I have a new video coming out. And again, it helps spread the message to our fellow Americans and people around the world that frankly listen to this particular program. But I'm curious if you agree or disagree with my assessment of this Jack Smith situation. It's exactly the way I see it. I wrote down a couple notes here so that I can just kind of summarize my response, and you can tell me if you agree or not. Then we're going to take a look right away and see what President Donald Trump had to say all about this. This is currently breaking news because there's a lot of comments and fallout, if you would. So I said today is a victory for justice and the American people. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, in what I believe was an illegal appointed role. Remember, that is also being something that's going through the court system right now. An illegally appointed special counsel filed these motions on federal court today to dismiss the pending cases of against President-elect Donald Trump. This is not just a triumph for Donald Trump. It's a win. It's a win for you and me. It's a win for the principles of fairness, due process, and the very foundation of our great republic. For too long, we witnessed the weaponization of our legal system, turning it into a tool for partisan attacks and political revenge. This type of lawfare, where one party uses the courts to destroy its opposition, undermines the core values of our democracy. It erodes trust in our institutions and sets a very dangerous precedent that no free society can afford. Today's development is a reminder that our justice system must remain impartial, and that the rule of law should never be compromised for political gain again. Let me know what you think about that. You agree with my little summary right there? One way or the other, I'm curious in your take. American Anna says, yeah, it's on the first list as I'm learning my interview. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for your comments, sweetheart. I appreciate it as always. Folks, I can't under stress just how, or I should say overstress, how important this is today to just finally have this put to bed. Do you realize that if President Donald Trump elect was to have lost this election, do you know there is a very high chance Donald Trump would probably be spending the rest of his natural life in prison? Think about that. That's almost shocking to think of, but that's exactly what they tried to do this man. Technically, they're still trying to do it to him in the great state of New York. It's kind of unconscionable, but that's exactly where this was all headed. If they continued on the road they were on, it was correct that had President Trump lost this election, he would be in serious legal peril. Probably his family, his children. He would probably end up losing the vast majority of what wealth he has. I mean, this would have been a terrible situation and, frankly, a tragedy for our country. You have a president that's already 78 years old. You can imagine what prison would do to a man like that. It's just really sad and unconscionable that these people would do that to a great man like President Donald Trump elect. But thank God things did not turn out that way, and we're on the path to better days. I firmly believe this. So let's take a peek here and let's see exactly what our favorite president, President Donald Trump, had to say today. So this was just within the last hour, 58 minutes ago. So this is Donald Trump's response to the developments from today. All right, it goes on. It says, and this is on Truth Social, these cases, like all the other cases I have been forced to go through, are empty and lawless and should never have been brought. Over $100 million of taxpayer dollars has been wasted in the Democratic Party fight against their political opponent, me. Nothing like this has ever happened in our country before. They have also used the state prosecutors, the district attorneys, such as Fani Willis and her lover, Nathan Wade, who had absolutely zero experience in cases such as this, but was paid millions, enough for them to take numerous trips and cruises around the globe. Letitia James, who inappropriately, unethically, and probably illegally campaigned on getting Trump. Remember that? In order to win political office. And Alvin Bragg, who himself never wanted to bring this case against me, but was forced to do so by the Justice Department and the Democratic Party. Very sad, ain't it? And you got a lot of people responding. Here says, God and country, they say Trump is out of control, but he's not. He's just out of their control. That was said by Tucker Carlson. I think that's exactly correct. That's a good way to put that. So make America safe again. That's a perfect response by President Donald Trump, I believe. Let me see if he said anything here. He goes on to say it was political hijacking and a low point in the history of our country that such a thing could have happened. And yet I persevered against all odds and won Make America Great Again. So that's former President, AKA President Donald Trump-elect's response to these current developments. What another great day in our country. You know, I obviously enjoy, as I'm sure you do, each and every day I'm alive, but it is definitely a good feeling, and you feel just that much better when you know that something so important to our country has been elected president. You know, the events that have happened these past 2.5 weeks, I would hate to think what would have happened should this have went the other way, ladies and gentlemen. This would have been nothing short of a travesty for the United States of America. And you know what? Even though Donald Trump clearly has a mandate, clearly won overwhelmingly in the Electoral College, as we've looked at, he won the popular vote, which again is unusual for a Republican candidate for the presidency. So it's really a great accomplishment that Donald Trump was able to pull that through. But remember this, if you look at the numbers and you dive deep into these numbers, it's a lot closer than I'd like to think it is. I mean, you're looking at the total votes are still being counted. There's a few outliers that they're trying to iron out. But like we looked at the other day, you're looking at 2-3% difference in the entire country, and that's out of 160 million votes that may have been cast. We'll get the final numbers and we'll talk about them at some time, but let's be straight up about it. This is concerning. Thank God again. Thank you, Lord, that Donald Trump has won and was able to pull this out. By the way, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I forgot to introduce myself officially. I'm J.R. Dukes. We're all about the free-minded patriots over here. We are all about ending indoctrination and living your best life possible by understanding the world we live in. We're all about politics, asset protection, knowing how to deal with the police and how to navigate our court systems. I love to shine a light on the things that are going around in our world so that you can teach it to your kids, so you can educate yourself and you can make your own choices and decisions about what's going on in our society and in our world. In a nutshell, I want to help you live your best life. It's just that simple. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this next video. American Ann, I want to make sure I catch up with you. Yes, this would have been bad had we, let's say, sorry that you pup. That's okay. We're glad to have you here with us. Let's take a look at this next video, because I want to compare the difference between Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and some of these other news media. It's something that I don't know if it's ever going to end. Now, if someone like Elon Musk was to buy MSNBC, or if ABC ends up selling off some of their news assets so they can have other people, let's just say other people, take control of these so-called news agencies and put a more even perspective, at a minimum, something even on their news production, maybe this will have a positive effect somehow, some way, especially in the future. But for now, they're basically still engaging in this. I don't know. It's somewhat of an indoctrination. They have bad facts, and make no mistake about it. They are after us as far as our free speech is concerned. They want us to stop saying what we say, like on this channel. They want to tell us what is reality, what is not reality, what is false, what is true. As we've talked about, misinformation, disinformation. John Kerry was just on television the other day, and that's what he was talking about, that how else could we have won an election when you have people like Elon Musk allowing misinformation on the X platform. They're blaming everybody except themselves for their huge loss, and they have no one to blame but themselves. So here was the reaction. These are new videos coming directly from Fox News. And Jonathan Turley, he's got an interesting way to look at it. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. But let's watch a little bit of this together, and we'll talk about it here.
All right. I think Carrie Urban's joining us now, John, Fox News legal editor. Okay. Carrie, your thoughts? Yeah, this was the right decision by the Department of Justice. As has been mentioned, we were expecting this, but this is because of DOJ's longstanding policy about not indicting / prosecuting a sitting president. And it looks like that Jack Smith's team did, in fact, seek the guidance of DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel, which is like the general counsel for the Department of Justice, in asking for these cases, the indictment to be dismissed. And OLC concluded that the prohibition on the federal indictment of a sitting president is, quote, categorical. And so that's why we knew this was coming. The Department of Justice made the right decision here following longstanding policy, and also not just the policy, but it's also in the best interest of the country, given Donald Trump's resounding win just recently.
You know, Carrie, we
again, I don't think it had anything to do with Department of Justice policy. As we just talked about, Jack Smith didn't care anything about their policy. All he cares about is convicting and prosecuting / persecuting Donald Trump and preventing him from being president. Now that he has failed at that, they have no choice but to walk down this road. They're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart, guaranteed.
Knew that this was going to happen, so it's no surprise, but it is rather interesting to note that after all of this money that was spent, out of all of this time that was spent, all of the prosecutors and the attorneys that Smith had working for his office in these two cases, that it just gets summarily dropped because of two things: the Supreme Court decision about immunity and the fact that a majority of Americans, more than 76 million, said they like Donald Trump. They don't care what he's accused of doing. They wanted him to be president.
But your question gets to the wisdom of even bringing this case in the first place. You have the January 6th cases, you have the classified documents cases. I've said this many times on air. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And there are all kinds of things that a prosecutor weighs. There are all kinds of things that an attorney general weighs. It's a lot more gray than people realize. Yes, you balance the law, but you also balance what is fair, and you also balance what is good for the health of a nation. When you are coming at a former sitting president and the possible future president, you have to be so incredibly careful. And you bet.
I disagree with her as far as this particular point goes. Jack Smith does not care anything about America. He does not care anything about following the law, the rules, the policies of the Department of Justice. He has no choice but to do what he just did. And in a minute, we're going to take a look at the actual paperwork that he filed today.
Better hope and better, your case, I should say, better be lock solid. I mean, there's no chance of it getting overturned. There's no novel legal theories, none of that. And in the January 6 cases, that just wasn't true. They were bringing untested legal theories. In other words, they were bringing the law against Donald Trump in a way that it had not been applied before. The Supreme Court addressed actually an aspect of the law that they were attempting to bring against both Donald Trump and all the January 6 defendants. And the Supreme Court said, hey, look, this law that you're using against Trump and these defendants, it's not a blank check that you can kind of insert and write into what you want it to be. And that happened in June. Then you had the Supreme Court immunity decision. And so, again, while, yes, to your point, $50+ million was spent, the reality is it didn't have to happen in the first place. And that's, going to be something debated, I think, by historians for a long time.
Carrie, thank you. Please do stay with us. Jonathan Turley going to jump into the conversation now. The breaking news that special counsel.
I like Jonathan Turley. I think he's pretty level-headed, pretty even-handed. He'll call it like he sees it, whether it benefits Trump or not. He's definitely on the conservative side of things. You guys like him? I'm curious. Like him, dislike him? Let me know. Put in the chat. I'm curious as to what y'all think about him. I know a lot of y'all don't like Alan Dershowitz for whatever reason. I personally like him. I think he's pretty cool, but I also like Turley. But anyway, I'm just curious.
Counsel Jack Smith has asked the judge to dismiss this Trump DC case. Jonathan, also adding to this from our own Jake Gibson, that the special counsel, Jack Smith's team, also sought the guidance of the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel, the OLC, concluded that the prohibition on the federal indictment of a sitting president is categorical. Jonathan, your reaction to the news?
Well, this is what we expected. I wrote over a year ago that there was a good chance Jack Smith would never see the inside of a courtroom for a trial in this case. It made this election the largest effective jury verdict in history by re-electing Donald Trump. The special counsel found himself at odds with his own department's longstanding policy against the prosecution of a sitting president. But Smith did not go quietly into that night.
That's right.
I expect that he did get a lot of different opinions, hoping for the right one. But the OLC this office that handles such questions has long taken this position. So it would be doubtful that they would change it here. But, you know, Smith had a sort of a gratuitous end to his term. You know, he pushed not only for a trial before the election, and he pushed for months for that, but he also released damaging information before the election, something that many people saw as an effort to influence the election.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a fantastic point, and it emphasizes what I've been saying earlier. Despite what you hear on these other channels, that Jack Smith is this upstanding guy and he respects and abides by the law and abides by DOJ policy, that's a bunch of nonsense. Again, they have a policy that 30, 60, 90 days out from an election that they will not take any action that could affect a particular candidate one way or the other. They just simply don't do that. But like Jonathan Turley just said, one of the additional things that he did, remember, he dumped a bunch of information that, what was that Judge Tanya Chunkin, that crazy DC judge out there, she was appointed by Barack Obama. She allowed him at his request. They're trying to make it sound like the judge was the one that did that, but that's not true. I mean, it was the judge that ordered it released, but it was at the behest of Jack Smith. Again, clearly trying to influence the election in the 11th hour, and of course it did not work.
Smith knew that if Trump won, he was out of a job. And this release of the information was entirely unnecessary. The judge admitted that it was procedurally irregular, but she went along with it.
That's
and
right.
I think that did tarnish his position, and certainly in history, because he didn't have to do that. He had become so absolutely fixated on trying Trump before the election that he lost credibility, I think, with the courts. He went up to the Supreme Court. They didn't accept that was the overriding consideration in looking at these legal issues. I think it's also very important to remember that Smith's case was riddled with constitutional problems. You know, when the Supreme Court reached its immunity decision, it was clear that he would have to pare down his indictment. He really didn't do it to the degree he needed to do. He took a very minimalist approach. He removed a few references, a few witnesses that stemmed from the first Trump.
Yeah, and what he's talking about right here is, remember, the Supreme Court of the United States effectively struck down the original indictment brought by Jack Smith, because the Supreme Court basically said you cannot try a president for acts that he committed while he was the president of the United States. Basically, he has absolute immunity. So what Jack Smith did is he just kind of repackaged the original indictment, the original complaint, and then went with that. And like John Turley was just saying, that's not going to work either. Had it went the complete distance, there was substantially nothing there that was that much difference. And I for one totally agree with that. Let's take a look at what the other news channels have to say. That, of course, that was Fox News. You're going to get a little bit of a different take, to say the least, over on MSNBC. And remember, this is the same company now that are, they are having some serious financial problems. They are losing a ton of viewers in the wake of President Donald Trump's victory. There's a lot of controversy. You know, you had the Morning Joe, you had Joe Scarborough and his wife Mika. They went to meet with President Donald Trump-elect, and they have made even more of their viewing audience mad one way or the other. Folks, I got a little clue for you, a little life tip for you. If you decide to do something, right, and you go forward with something, and you're kind of dividing people, right, one thing you don't want to do is change that decision. At least that's just my opinion. Because when you change a decision after you've made a decision, and it's something socially to do where people have an opinion one way or the other, all that does is make both sides mad at you. Nobody likes you in that type of situation. And we see that happening all the time. You end up making your entire audience hate you. You need to go ahead, and when you plant a flag, you need to fight it. That's just my take. All right, so moving on here is MSNBC This is a newer video. It was just from, I think it was just from a couple hours ago. Obviously, this is all breaking news, but we're going to bounce around and listen to a small section of this.
Breaking news now from Washington, where special counsel Jack Smith has now informed federal judge Tanya Chutkan that his office will decide by December 2nd how to proceed with the federal election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump. Joining me now is MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Lisa, this is the beginning, the next step in the winding down that was presaged by the reporting out of the Justice Department earlier this week.
That's right. And Andrea, that's reporting from our own NBC News colleagues, Ken Delanian and Laura Jarrett, that Jack Smith and his colleagues would look to wind these cases down one way or another. They are now signaling to Judge Chutkan that we are in unprecedented circumstances and that they need until December 2nd to evaluate how they are going to move forward, and will send her a status report on that date. But in the interim, they're also asking her, please suspend all of the pretrial deadlines that we and the Trump team have between now and then. We don't want any more briefing on the existing motions. We want some time to think. And it may be that what they are going to do with that time is also prepare a more traditional special counsel's report to signal the end of their investigation, but also reveal to the American public perhaps even more than we've already seen in, for example, that 175 plus page immunity brief that they submitted earlier this fall.
And Lisa, at this stage, we don't know about the other federal case. Of course, the very complicated situation in Florida, where the judge has ruled against a special prosecutor, and there is a Justice Department imperative, really, from their perspective to.
Yeah, and what they're talking about here is not only are they talking about this decision or this pending decision before Judge Tanya Chutkan in the DC case pertaining to Jack Smith. They're talking about the case in Florida where you had that judge that was I think she was appointed by Trump. She was appointed by Donald Trump. She's a fantastic judge, and she ended up throwing out the entire case because she ruled that Jack Smith was appointed illegally, that his entire appointment is illegal. And that's really got the DOJ upset, because they want it to be very easy for them to appoint a special prosecutor whenever they decide to appoint a special prosecutor. So what they're hoping to do is to continue the appeal all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court to get a precedent ruling for the future, so they know one way or the other how these prosecutors can be appointed or not appointed. However, despite what she may say, I don't see how the case is going to be able to continue on appeal when the head of the new DOJ, aka Donald Trump's DOJ head, whoever ends up with that approval to head that agency, they're not. They're going to go in and tell the court immediately, no, we would like to withdraw this particular appeal. And but don't get me wrong, the Democrats are going to do everything they can to fight for the Supreme Court to hear it. So
appeal that decision, but not proceed with the case itself on the classified documents.
Right. Well, Andrea, that appeal is fully briefed right now, meaning it's in the hands of the 11th Circuit, one of the federal courts of appeal. But as it stands right now, that complaint or that indictment has been dismissed. It may be that Jack Smith's office goes to the 11th Circuit and says, we're going to withdraw our appeal, because they don't want to make bad law. They don't want a situation in which a federal court of appeals says that the statutes and regulations underlying the appointment of a special counsel are not constitutional. And that's exactly what Judge Aileen Cannon in Florida had found earlier.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Aileen Cannon, that was the judge. The judge that was definitely, I would say she's pro-Trump. Obviously, Trump appointed her. It's just the way our political process works. And just like she said, they don't want to leave it with the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, because they're afraid the 11th Circuit might drop a ruling saying, no, the appointment was unconstitutional. And then they have a precedent law. They don't want that. So he'll probably withdraw that if he's able to do so before the 11th Circuit makes a ruling. Because remember, Jack Smith's ultimate goal, for the benefit of the Department of Justice, was to actually go before the United States Supreme Court and get a ruling from them stating that he could be appointed in the capacity that he was appointed. So it's bad news all the way around for Jack Smith and this rogue this rogue Department of Justice. If I'm honest with you, it's kind of making me tear up. I hate to see him losing so bad.
Earlier this year, Andrea.
All right. Well, that's that on there. Let's go ahead and switch and see exactly what our friends have to say over on, I think it's, yeah, here we go. This is on CNN. They have a good breakdown on this. There's this guy on here. He is a representative from the great state of New York, the home of Lawfare, of course. And he is going to take a deep dive. We're going to discuss more of this too, because this guy has definitely got a serious case of Trump derangement syndrome. So we'll have to see how that plays. Zach, thanks for joining us today, my friend. Yeah, I'll have to catch the replay. Wi-Fi's. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's all right, Zach. We're always glad when you join us, and you can always find the videos that I have on my channel. All you got to do is go to the actual video tab or the live feed tab, is I believe where they store all of these live feeds. But thanks for stopping by and listening to what you can. Okay, here's the video, as I just said, on CNN. This is all breaking news, so this is newer video from, like I said, just a couple hours ago. And you can tell by looking at their faces, they're not happy. CNN is in the same pot, so to speak, as MSNBC, because their viewership has taken a dramatic decline. People are seeing this woke nonsense for what it is. You can tell by looking at that guy's face right there. They do not look too happy. And I think she kind of has the body language to say she's not happy.
Paula Reed. And Paula, we understand that Jack Smith, special counsel, has weighed in on the status of one of Trump's cases. What can you tell us?
That's right. Special counsel Jack Smith is saying that he is going to move to dismiss one of the two criminal cases against President-elect Trump. Here, he is referring to the election subversion case that he filed against President-elect Trump roughly 2 years ago. He is saying that, quote, the country has never faced the circumstances here where you have a pending criminal case against a...
Yeah, I agree with that. The country has never faced a government, a president from one party that decides he's going to engage in lawfare and take out another candidate, that he's going to disenfranchise the American population from voting for the candidate that they want. So you had this clown right here in the middle of your screen right here as the weapon of the woke left trying to effectively pass their agenda. I guess their theory is, hey, listen, we cannot beat Donald Trump. We cannot convince the American population as a whole that we have the correct the correct outlook on the world and our lives or whatnot. So we're going to have to put this guy in prison. And of course, that's exactly what they tried to do.
Two co-defendants there who are not presidents-elect. So we'll be watching to see what the special counsel does here. But in terms of the special counsel's case against Trump related to January 6th and his alleged efforts to interfere with the outcome of the 2020 election, here Jack Smith asking to dismiss this case. Now, this is not a big surprise. A short time ago, a couple weeks ago, Smith has...
Okay, I'm going to bounce over to this clown right here. This is the guy, as I just said, from New York. This guy, I think it's Dan Goldman. Yeah, it is Dan Goldman, Democrat out of New York. This guy is a complete clown. He's you know what kind of show he is. But let's go ahead and pick it up right here and let's listen to this. And let me know what you think about this guy. If you're near your phone, type it in. Let me know. This guy is really a special kind of show, if you know exactly what I'm saying. He is definitely a woke clown.
Once he or she got into office. So this is not a huge surprise. The special counsel moving to dismiss this historic case.
All right, Paula Reed, thank you so much.
Yeah, please stand by, Paula. We want to discuss this and more with Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman of New York. He sits on the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Just right off the bat, your reaction to Jack Smith announcing that he will file to dismiss the charges in the election subversion case against former President Trump.
Well, look, I certainly understand why he did it, given the Department of Justice policy that you cannot prosecute a sitting president. I think it is a shame for justice in this country. It establishes that Donald Trump is above the law. The Supreme Court.
These are just fantastic lies, ladies and gentlemen, just complete lies. The special prosecutor doesn't give a damn about the law. He doesn't care anything about the guidelines, so to speak, of the Department of Justice. As we just talked about, this guy was releasing information in violation of those policies against Donald Trump, trying to influence the election right before the election. In addition to that, he's been persecuting President Donald Trump when he was not supposed to do that under these same DOJ guidelines, all the way up to the election. Technically, he's still prosecuting him. He still has been fighting every day, and their goal was to get a trial against Donald Trump and to get a conviction and hopefully get him incarcerated and somehow find a way to keep him from becoming president of the United States. That's been their goal all along. So this guy's a complete idiot, a complete clown. He is just outright lying to you when he makes these comments that Donald Trump's above the law. Donald Trump is not above the law. And you know what this election proves? It proves that we all see through this nonsense. It's nonsense. They keep lying to us. It's kind of like we see it and they tell you, don't believe your lying eyes. Well, we see what's going on. The American populace has spoke. But unfortunately, this idiot that you see right there on your screen, I'm going to put myself in the corner here so you can see him better. This clown on your screen right there, this is the type of individuals we still have representing certain segments of our population in Congress right now today. Pitiful.
Put him above the law in that opinion that Paula just mentioned. But now he appears to escape full accountability for what were crimes charged by a grand jury.
Again, crimes charged by a grand jury. We have all been told our entire lives a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. That's a famous quote from a long time ago, and it's the way it is. A grand jury rarely ever returns what they call a not true bill. It's either a true bill or it's not. A true bill is effectively an indictment. If a prosecutor wants an indictment, a quote unquote grand jury, it's meaningless. It means nothing. That's the reason why it has nothing to do with someone that's on trial other than they can go forward to a trial. But it doesn't mean nothing. And don't believe the nonsense that someone is above the law. Just because a grand jury indicted someone is meaningless. The U.S. Supreme Court did not say Donald Trump is above the law. What he said was for official acts as president of the United States, you cannot have somebody like Fani Willis come back behind him after he leaves office and say, oh, you violated the law as president of the United States by doing this, this, and this. If that was allowed by the U.S. Supreme Court, the office of the presidency would be effectively greatly diminished, if not to a point to where it could not actually effectively operate. I mean, who would want that job knowing that every decision that you make is going to have a Fani Willis waiting for you when you get out of office? If you are a Republican, you're going to have a Democratic woke DA trying to make a name for himself or herself when you get out of the office, and vice versa. If you're a Democrat, it's going to be a Republican AG or just one of these local solicitors that's just ready to get famous, put their names in the history books by hammering you. And thank God the U.S. Supreme Court made the correct decision. And the scary thing is all three liberal justices on the Supreme Court said that was the wrong decision. They wanted Donald Trump able to be tried for these alleged crimes that do not exist. Unconscionable.
And I would just add one other thing that we ought to pay close attention to. We cannot normalize the fact that Donald Trump, as the president-elect, should not be held accountable for crimes that he committed before. If he were to have fired the special counsel, that would be a gross abdication of the independence of the department.
More nonsense. No matter what they tell you, the Department of Justice is not and never has been separate from the presidency. The presidency is the executive branch of the government, and the Department of Justice is one of the main arms of the executive branch. That's the reason why it's controlled by the executive branch. They have always tried to make the DOJ separate from the president, make it independent, make it look more legit. It has not ever worked. They've been trying that to the best of my memory. I know way back in the Johnson administration and even FDR, all these people, they all had issues and conversations like you're hearing right now relating to the Department of Justice. There's been presidents a long time ago accused of using the DOJ for purposes that they shouldn't be using the DOJ for. So this guy is just talking nonsense.
Department of Justice. And if the shoe were on the other foot, for example, and Joe Biden were to have fired David Weiss, who clearly had a politicized investigation because the House Republicans effectively scuttled a plea agreement, everyone would be up in arms. So let's make sure that we don't normalize Donald Trump's political partisan behavior that has no place.
This normalizing stuff is another aggravation and just another example of them trying to state facts that are, they're just simply not facts. The Supreme Court was very clear. If you do something and it's not related in any capacity to your functioning as the president of the United States, you can be held responsible for any type of crimes that you commit. I mean, it's common sense. They should have also known this was coming. And I'm talking about the Department of Justice. It's been law since the 1980s. I think it was something that involved Richard Nixon. On a civil context, the Supreme Court back then made a decision that a president of the United States could not civilly be held liable for anything related to being the president of the United States or his actions that he took or did not took as president of the United States. And generally in the law, when someone has a civil right or a civil obligation of some sort, it generally translates into the criminal realm. And in this particular situation, the fact that a president long ago ruled in the early 1980s that there's no civil liability for their actions, it's common sense, although it has not directly been answered by the U.S. Supreme Court until this particular case involving Donald Trump. It's common sense that it would apply to criminal prosecution or persecution. And finally, again, when you hear him talk about, hey, he was convicted of these charges involving acts before he was president of the United States, well, that's not exactly true. What they did, they took dead misdemeanors. These were alleged violations of federal law. And let's say the ones back from 2016 were actually bookkeeping alleged crimes. In other words, did he or his accountant actually call an expense what it should have been? Remember, we talked about this at depth. The checks to Stormy Daniels, each count, the 34 counts, the 36 counts, whatever the number is, they were checks. Those were checks written and signed by President Donald Trump to Stormy Daniels, and each check is a separate, at the time it was a separate misdemeanor, but they turned it in to separate felonies. That's how come you see so many felony convictions. But ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, here's what it was. The payments to Stormy Daniels for hush money for sex, there's nothing illegal about that. That's perfectly legal. The classification was supposed to be what's illegal. Is it a personal expense or was it a campaign expense? Donald Trump said, oh, no, it's a personal expense. So he paid it out of his own personal money. You had Alvin Bragg say, oh, no. That should have been a campaign expenditure. And had he classified as a campaign expenditure, it might have changed the election because he would have had to report it. And again, that's another lie, because when he wrote the checks, it was like the last quarter or the third quarter of 2016. He would have already been elected president of the United States before he had to disclose those particular payouts, had he counted them as campaign expenses. Does that make sense? So it's just lies and misinformation all the way around. But I can tell you this, had Donald Trump classified those expenses or those checks he wrote to Stormy Daniels, had he called them campaign expenses, he would have been brought up on these felonies again, because they would have said, no, that was about you having sex with a porn star, so you should have classified them as personal expenses. The fix was in, ladies and gentlemen. He was going to go down either way, but they took what was originally misdemeanors, a misclassification of expense, and they were dead. What does dead mean? Well, they were dead. They couldn't go forward to be prosecuted because of the statute of limitations. And that's a fancy way to say after so much time, you cannot prosecute somebody for an alleged crime. Well, the clock ran out, statute of limitations was done. So you had Alvin Bragg come up with this novel theory, just a novel theory. In other words, a new theory is what basically that means. And it's original. Original is a kind word for it, but it had a longer statute of limitations. So they were able to go back to 2016, resurrect. It's almost like a religious felony. It's like a resurrection of dead misdemeanors. And not only are they now live, but they're not misdemeanors no more. Now they're live felonies. So in a nutshell, that's what all that was about. It's lawfare. It's lies. It's trying to confuse everybody about what's going on. It's designed to dirty Donald Trump up. And the bottom line was, it's all about stopping Donald Trump. And of course, they have famously and spectacularly failed
place under our rule of law.
Congressman, you know that the American people were well aware of the charges that Donald Trump was facing in this case and several others. What do you make of the argument that they essentially served as a jury, and by reelecting him and now making him president-elect, they have weighed in on these matters?
I don't give any credence to that argument. I think what was very clear is that people voted for Donald Trump because they thought that he was going to improve the lives of the middle class, and perhaps in addition that he would secure the border. They did not vote for him to dismantle our democracy, to attack the Constitution, to politicize all of our agencies, and certainly not as a referendum on his criminal cases.
Well, wasn't that rich? They did not vote for Donald Trump to basically change our government or to corrupt our government. What have we been living under for the last 4 years? A Biden-Harris administration that has taken the great country that we have, corrupted all of our agencies, and introduced this lawfare. And to go after one man that they just hated, they went ahead and took a tradition that we've had in the United States of justice being blind and justice being equal, and they repackaged this and retargeted against one man to stop you and me from having a vote.
Those cases should have been played out in a court of law. I believe the Attorney General should have started the investigation a lot earlier. I believe the Supreme Court should have moved much quicker in its opinion. And Donald Trump should not have been able to run out the clock on these charges. But I certainly don't think.
And what he's saying by running out the clock, what he really means to say is the woke Democrats should have started this the day after Donald Trump left office, January 21st, 22nd. They should have immediately indicted him and went after him, so they would have more time to get even more felony convictions, charges, and hopefully incarcerate the man. That's what he means to say.
Anything that came from the election was a reflection of support for Donald Trump getting rid of these cases, largely because the American people, as you and I as well, we don't know what the actual evidence is.
I mean, I imagine that a lot of voters had to know that those cases would go away if he were president, given what you said about the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity. That doesn't change the way you think about this at all. The fact that voters must have known that he wasn't going to prison or to be convicted of some of these crimes if he was going to be elected?
Well, look, I think ultimately the majority of voters who voted for Donald Trump decided that, what they're dealing with in their day-to-day lives, understandably matters a lot more than what's going on in a criminal court with Donald Trump.
First of all, I love how this guy thinks he's the expert on all things Donald Trump, and he knows how you and me voted. He knows how all these voters voted. He knows how Donald Trump is thinking and what he's thinking about. And of course, this guy is a goof. He doesn't know anything of the sort, but he basically wants us to believe that we voted for Donald Trump despite his criminal activities. And it's just nonsense. Everybody knew all of what is going on with Donald Trump, and it could be, which he won't admit, that we're sick of the lawfare and this targeting of individuals so they cannot run for president.
I think it's sad. I think it should be disqualifying, but I certainly understand why people are more focused on their price of groceries, on their job prospects, on the affordability crisis. But I do expect, Boris, that the special counsel will release a very detailed and exhaustive report outlining all of his evidence. That is the ordinary course for a special counsel when they wind down. And I would expect that the special counsel will do that before he leaves office.
And Congressman, before we let you go, I have to ask you about this. You recently introduced a resolution to clarify the Constitution's two-term limit for presidents. Do you think that there's a serious push?
Yeah, what they're talking about here is of course, Donald Trump's the big bad boogeyman. And among other things, now Donald Trump's going to stay in office. He's not going to leave. It's his second term. He's constitutionally barred from running, and short of amending the Constitution, he cannot run for another term as president of the United States. Not to mention the man's going to be 82 years old when his term is completed. But these goofs and these clowns want to instill fear in all of us. It's unfounded fear. It's irrational fear. It's just fantasy, fantastic lies, if you will. And they want us all to believe that Donald Trump somehow, some way, well, he's not going to leave office. He's a tyrant. He's Hitler. He's going to stick around, and he's just not going to leave. He's going to take over everything. They've been lying to us from the get-go on each and everything pertaining to Donald Trump. And I, for one, I'm like you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sick of it. It's upsetting, aggravating, and these people need to be voted out of office. I would imagine somebody like that clown we just heard from, he's probably, of course, he's in blue New York, and I would imagine his little district that he's got right there is probably one of those that are 90%, 95% Democratic. So he's probably got a rather safe seat. I think that's pretty obvious. But these clowns, these deniers, I think that's a good word. They're Trump deniers. They're Trump election deniers. We need to start that as a hashtag. Trump election deniers. What do y'all think about that? You like that? These people are Trump election deniers. What is that? TED? They're TEDs. Trump election deniers. I like that. I think I'll start going with something like that. American Nana, I love that. They say above the law because it's going to be a winning message for us. No one's above the law. That's exactly right, American Nana. And as I like to tell everybody, remind everyone, Donald Trump is not above the law. We all know that. It's gaslighting. It's gaslighting at its worst against all of us, trying to scare everybody. But you know what? Donald Trump is not below the law either. He deserves the same justice, the same legal process that we all are entitled to. It's always interesting to me how they keep saying he's not above the law, but on a lot of things, they try to act like certain things do not apply to him. One of the ones on top of my head is the pardoning. You know, the president has the power to pardon anyone that he wants to pardon. And of course, it has not officially been ruled on by the U.S. Supreme Court. If he can pardon anyone, why could he not pardon himself for federal crimes? Kind of makes sense to me. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but if each and every one of us have that ability to be pardoned, why would he be exempt? In other words, why would he be below the law? And I think, unfortunately, in the United States, and we're going to find out if I'm right or not, Joe Biden's going to be leaving office. Guarantee you he's going to pardon Hunter Biden. Not a doubt in my mind. Can you imagine any parent that would not pardon their own children that were facing 15, 18, 20 years in prison, whatever the prison sentence is he's looking for? And he's looking at a long sentence because he has a prior conviction on the drugs or whatever the prior conviction was. And then he's a known drug user. I mean, these are all negatives for Hunter Biden. Again, it's probably going to depend a lot on the judge and the jurisdiction. But if you look at the sentencing guidelines, he looks at a substantial sentence. I know President Biden said he's not going to do it. Don't bet on it. Don't hold your breath. I know if it was my children, I would definitely do it. I got another little prediction. I think it's highly possible now that President Biden has been through what he's been through with this coup, and Kamala Harris has effectively lost what he probably views as his. And by the way, I think Joe Biden is a secret Trump supporter, Trump voter at a minimum. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to see him pardon Hunter Biden and Donald Trump to put a stop to the mess, or at least attempt to put a stop to some of the mess that he alone created. What do you think about that? You think that's possible? You're going to see him. I'm going to make sure I save this video because I've called it here. He's going to definitely pardon Hunter Biden. And I think there's better than a 50-50 shot that he's also going to pardon Donald Trump. This man is clearly concerned with his so-called legacy, which I think is absolutely in ruins and burning to the ground. But we'll see how it is. I would think Joe Biden, because of this lawfare and what he has done against Donald Trump, I'd go as far as to say, I think because of this, he could be looked at as one of the worst presidents in American history. Do you guys agree with me on that? I'm curious as to what your take is. I think that is how history is going to look back at this situation. But again, I could be wrong, but I think it's pretty easy in this particular case. All right, let's take a look at these papers. These are the actual documents that were filed. And this view looks all right, I guess. You can see the vast majority of it. You can read along. We're not going to read every single word of it, but this is the document that was filed today. You see the 11/25/24 mark right here, and it's only 6 pages long. And this had to be very hard and very difficult for old Jack Smith to file. I'm certain he was not a happy camper having to file this, but I guess it is what it is, right? All right, in the United States District Court for District of Columbia, this, of course, is Judge Tanya Shunkin. I'm sure her name's going to appear somewhere down here. This is from Jack Smith, United States of America versus Donald Trump. Isn't that sad to even see that on a document? All right, government's motion to dismiss as a result of the election held on November 5th, 2024. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, will be inaugurated as president January 20th, 2025. Yay! As goes on, it has long been the position of the Department of Justice that the United States Constitution forbids the federal indictment and subsequent criminal prosecution of a sitting president. But the department and the country have never faced the circumstances here where a federal indictment against a private citizen has been returned by a grand jury and a criminal prosecution is already underway where the defendant is elected president. Yeah, well, this whole situation is truly unprecedented. I would word it a different way. I would say it's unprecedented that the Biden-Harris administration, one president, tried to eliminate his competition, and yet it didn't work, and he was elected president. That would be the narrative I would use if I was writing this document. It says, confronted with this unprecedented situation, the special counsel's office consulted with the OLC, Department of Office of Legal Counsel, whose interpretation of the constitutional questions, such as those raised here, is binding on department prosecutors. After careful consideration, the department has determined the OLC's prior opinions concerning the Constitution's prohibition on federal indictment and prosecution of a sitting president apply to this situation, and that as a result, this prosecution must be dismissed before the defendant is inaugurated, before inauguration day. That prohibition is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the government stands fully behind. In other words, he's like, I could hammer this guy. I got the goods on him. I could put him in jail for the rest of his life. But because he's going to be the next president, we're going to be good guys, and we're going to stick with the Department of Justice's policy about going after a current or sitting president of the United States. And as we talked about, that's a bunch of nonsense. Based on the department's interpretation of the Constitution, the government moves for dismissal without prejudice. Now, the without prejudice means that technically the government could refile the entire case and start all over. I just don't think that could happen in reality, but you never know. That's interesting, though, that he would put without prejudice. Again, without prejudice meaning they could theoretically refile it. If I was President Donald Trump, I don't know what his plans are exactly to put a stop to lawfare, but before I leave office, I would pardon myself. Why not? If it doesn't hold up, so be it. At least the Supreme Court can decide one way or the other should they choose to go after then President Donald Trump. But we'll see how that works out. Let's see. Based on the department's interpretation of the Constitution, the government moves for dismissal without prejudice of the superseding indictment under the federal rules of criminal procedure. The government has conferred with defense counsel, who does not object to the motion. Well, of course. And then they go into the legal standard. The federal rules, criminal procedures allow for the dismissal. And then the discussion, they go down to break it down. On August 1st, 2023, a federal grand jury of citizens in the District of Columbia, which is all Democratic, or Democrats, by the way, found probable cause for an indictment. What I would have said if it was me writing this document, I would have said on August 1st, 2023, shortly after we found out that Donald Trump was a likely and viable candidate to be the top of the Republican ticket and perhaps the next president of the United States, we decided to engage in lawfare to put a stop to it. That's exactly what this is saying. It goes on to say, after the Supreme Court held last summer in Trump versus the United States, they're citing that case that the woke Democrats are all upset about, that a defendant was immune from prosecution for certain abuses. You know, this is proof of what I've been talking about. You have all these talking heads and these other lawyers saying that Donald Trump is a king and he's immune from everything. Even Jack Smith knows better, because he says right here, after the Supreme Court held last summer in Trump versus the United States, that a defendant was immune from prosecution for certain abuses of official power alleged in the original indictment. A second grand jury returned superseding indictment. All right, and then we'll move on. The government's position on the merits of the defendant's prosecution has not changed, but the circumstances have as a result of the election. He's elected to be president, and he'll be certified January 6, 2025, and inaugurated January 20th, 2025. And it says, given this unprecedented circumstances, special counsel's office consulted with the OLC, the attorneys, as we talked about, which by delegation the Attorney General provides controlling legal evidence to the executive branch, including the department. And it goes into more description of why they are doing what they're doing and why they have the legal ability to do that. Both the 1973 and 2000 OLC opinions recognize the critical national interest in upholding the rule of law, and stated that the president is not above the law. You know, there again, a lot of this that's in here, in my humble opinion, is just them kind of grandstanding, either grandstanding or it's bordering on gaslighting. They're basically trying to say what a strong case they have, and they could have incarcerated him forever. And that's probably true. They were seeking to put him in for life, for the rest of his life. That's a sobering fact, ain't it? Had he not won president of the United States, notwithstanding all the problems our entire nation would have, I have no doubt in telling you this man would be going to jail for the rest of his life. Everybody's saying Judge Merchant, for example, would not send Donald Trump to prison over those resurrected misdemeanors that became felonies. And I just respectfully disagree. Not a doubt in my mind that Judge Merchant would have sent Donald Trump to Rikers Island. I don't know how he could not have. Someone convicted of 34, 36 felonies, even though they were Class E felonies, and the judge had to fine / sanction President Donald Trump no less than 10 times for alleged misconduct in violation of the court's orders. Remember those unconstitutional orders telling him he can't speak, he can't talk? I mean, it's unbelievable. A candidate for president of the United States that has a muzzle on him. But anyway, considering that many felonies, that many discipline actions by the court, and the numerous statements that Donald Trump did make, basically blasting the court, no way would he not have gone to prison. I don't see any other way. I don't see any other way about that. So that, whoa, okay, I want to say hello, and let's see, no one's above the law. Lori, Liz, I'm sorry, Liz, about 1964, 1999 super chat. Thank you, sweetheart. I sincerely appreciate that. Very kind and sweet of you. Welcome to the program. It's a pleasure having you here, and I definitely appreciate your support of the channel. Thank you so much. That's Liza. Okay, you're definitely on my new best friend list. Seriously, I do appreciate you and appreciate your support of the channel. It makes me feel good when I get support like that. It's my goal to try to help each and every one of us out and understand the world that we're all living in. So moving on with this right here. This is the last page of it. He's just dissecting the indictment and what the lawyers at the OLC have said. And he says, for the foregoing reasons, the government respectfully moves under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 48A for the dismissal without prejudice that we talked about a second ago of the superseding indictment. Respectfully submitted, Jack Smith. So interesting. I would say the judge has no other choice but to pretty well dismiss that. And thank you, Liz. I really do appreciate you, sweetheart. Thank you so much for that. Really do appreciate all y'all being here, and everybody who has supported the channel over time. And It's humbling. I do appreciate it. So that, in a nutshell, is the actual document that was filed today. I think it's great news for President Donald Trump. And listen, no matter what they say, no matter what they tell us out there, this case is over one way or the other. I mean, it's just not going to go anywhere. All of these cases that have been brought illegally against President Donald Trump, they're gonna all die. I mean, I just think it's really clear like that. They're gonna go bye-bye. It's over with. I want to make sure I got all that done for you guys. These cases, ladies and gentlemen, are completely over. There's no other way to look at it other than that. The one with Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, remember, she hired her boyfriend, her lover, her paramour, whatever you want to call him. No experience handling criminal cases, at least RICO case. You know, a RICO case is a very sophisticated case by definition. And as we have looked at on this program, this guy did not know the first thing about a RICO case. He didn't even know the difference between a grand jury and a special grand jury under Georgia law. Outrageous. We've looked at the receipts and whatnot. That they've taken trips together. Remember all the cruises they went to? That case is over with. It's currently stuck at the Georgia Court of Appeals. We'll have to see exactly what's going to happen with that. She refuses to leave the case. Of course she does. The case is all about making her famous and stopping Donald Trump from being president. Of course, that is not going anywhere. You have the document case here in Florida before the one judge that threw it out. So that case is over with, and that was supposed to be the easiest case for the government to prove. The allegedly was the documents case. And of course, Jack Smith is over with. He's bowing out. He's running. He's going to run back home as fast as he can get out of D.C. before Donald Trump shows up in town and takes care of him. And then finally, in New York, you got Judge Merchan. You got the Attorney General there. That sweet Letitia James. The cases are done. Cases are over. Those fines will be at least reduced substantially. That E. Jean Carroll case, that civil situation, those type of fines, my friends, violate the Eighth Amendment. There's constitutional protections, frankly, against those types of awards where you can just literally dissolve everything that a man has, that you can just take property over something trivial just because you don't like the person. It's forbidden under the Constitution. And thank God our founding fathers were that wise to have the wisdom to do that. Clearly, they were specially touched by God and had his anointing and blessing on their lives to do just that. And I'm always proud to be an American, and it seems even more so right now in the wake of President Trump's election. Doesn't it feel like help is on the way? Things are about to get better. You know, a better day is just around the corner. I have been looking into the cabinet picks that President Donald Trump-elect has made, and I have a lot of information on those. Additionally, we're going to go through some of the police goings-on that are recent in the news that we need to talk about. A lot of interesting things going on over here in Miami. I want to talk a lot about the J6ers. Great news for them. President Trump is heading to Washington. You have one judge in particular, federal judge, that's been postponing some of these cases, I guess you can call them, against the J6ers. You have the current guy that's sitting on the, the D.C. bench, the D.C. circuit, whatever he calls himself, whatever. But he loves the J6ers. He loves to take them down and to put them in prison. On his page right there, the Justice Department's page for the District of Columbia, he's got everybody that's a J6er. He puts them right on the front of his page. He's just very happy. All the people he's got in jail for walking through the Capitol building or whatever their alleged crimes are, which I believe the Supreme Court has already said a lot of the people that are currently serving jail time, a lot of people that are currently charged, the crimes that they're alleged to have committed cannot go forward in the way that they're stated. They're trying to take laws again, like Alvin Bragg, and try to weave them in some type of novel fashion. And so that's a crime you committed. And of course, the Supreme Court has already said no on a lot of that. And thank God again for President Donald J. Trump-elect. I'm very certain that all, if not the extreme vast majority of the J6ers are going to go free. And finally, there is, that guy that killed that patriot at the January 6th, the young lady, that Marine that was crawling through the window. That guy, there's a new report out concerning him and some of the stuff in his past. And that's something I definitely want to talk about coming up very soon. I plan on going back live, Lord willing, in a couple hours, probably 7:15 Eastern Standard Time. I want to say hello to everybody one more time. Thanks, Zach, for being here. Of course, American Nana. Everybody that's been in the chat. Hope I don't miss anybody. I know we've had a lively chat today. And then, of course, my new best friend, Liza. Thank you so much for being here, sweetheart. I really do appreciate you and your support for the channel. So if you haven't subscribed, you can do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe if you're on X. On X, I put this all in the comments if you need the actually how to find me, because it's all right here. Matter of fact, I just retyped it in for you there. On the X platform, reach JR Dukes. Everything else is simply at JR Dukes. Right here on YouTube, at JR Dukes. If you turn on the notifications, or I know American Nana always goes to X. I try to always type in exactly when my next live is going live. If there's something you'd like me to look into, my contact information, phone number is at the bottom of the screen right there. Feel free to text me, reach out to me anytime. Love to know what you're thinking. Any type of comment, positive, negative, feel free to leave it. If you would like me to look into a particular subject, particular area, I'm happy to do that too. You're all invited back a little bit later today. We're going to talk about Donald Trump's cabinet and some of the other things that I was just kind of going over as far as lawfare and the J6 or some of the other police stuff. So listen, I hope everything's going well. Everybody's having a good day. I pray that the Lord's special anointing is on each and every one of you and on your family and your children, especially at this time of year. Got a great week ahead of us, this being the Thanksgiving. To me, each and every day is Thanksgiving. Thankful for all the many blessings we all have in our lives. And of course, I always hope for good health and prosperity for each and every one of you. I like to always say, my friends, keep your mind free, never give up. Until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.